No one ever caused the destruction that Anti-Pope Paul VI did with his apostate council, his abominable new mass, and his sweeping and revolutionary changes. As one priest said, the very face of Paul VI reveals much. What it doesn't reveal, however, are the mysterious events that took place in the 1963 conclave from which Anti-Pope Paul VI emerged. There is much controversy about this conclave, as well as the conclave in 1958 from which Anti-Pope John XXIII emerged. Forgetting for a moment that neither of these two men could have been elected pope in a legitimate conclave, both being heretics, there is evidence that neither was even elected. Paul Scortesco was a cousin of two members of the Vatican's Noble Guard, including the president of the Noble Guard, which was responsible for guarding the conclaves of 1958 and 1963, and making sure that no communication occurred with the outside. Scortesco revealed the following in a published letter. Quote, "In the case of John XXIII, 1958, and of Paul VI, 1963, there were communications with the outside. It was thus known that there were several ballots in the first conclave, which resulted in the election of Cardinal Tedeschini, and in the second, Cardinal Siri." End quote. Scortesco obtained this shocking information from members of the Noble Guard, and Scortesco was found burned alive in his bed shortly after the publication of this letter. So Scortesco, prior to being knocked off, revealed that Cardinal Tedeschini, not Anti-Pope John XXIII, was actually elected first in 1958, and Cardinal Siri, not Anti-Pope Paul VI, was elected first in 1963. Scortesco also mentioned communication with the outside, which his later writings indicate involved the B'nai B'rith, Jewish Freemasonry. If communications with the outside unlawfully influence a papal election, this means that such an election is invalid. The outside communication with the Freemasons most probably prevented Tedeschini and Siri from having the free ability to accept their elections, probably by various threats, including death. The Communists and the Freemasons knew that neither Tedeschini nor Siri would go along with their evil attempts to destroy the Catholic Church, so they had to block their elections. If the outside communication mentioned by Scortesco did influence Tedeschini and Siri from having the free ability to accept their elections, then the subsequent elections of Anti-Popes John XXIII and Paul VI were absolutely invalid for that fact alone, for the Church teaches that each person in a papal election must be free. Those who want more proof that the elections of Anti-Pope John XXIII and Paul VI were invalid need only to examine the revolution they caused. One needs only to think of the desolation of the faith that ensued and the millions of souls that have been lost, and one needs only to consider how they wasted no time in systematically trying to dismantle the Catholic Church. 30 Days magazine, a magazine favorable to the Vatican II anti-popes, held an interview in 1994 with the head of Italian Freemasonry, the Grand Master of the Grand Orient Lodge of Italy. The Grand Master stated, quote, "As for that, it seems that John XXIII was initiated into a Masonic lodge in Paris and participated in the work of the Istanbul workshops." End quote. So it's obvious that Anti-Pope John XXIII was a Freemasonic agent whose mission was to begin the attempted demolition of the Church of Christ by means of his false counsel. It is also known that on October 26, 1958, white smoke was seen emerging from the Sistine Chapel, indicating that a new pope had been elected, but no pope emerged. This was reported by newspapers throughout the world and heard on radio. Cardinals were even seen from the windows of the Apostolic Palace waving to the crowd, something not permitted if the conclave is still in session. They too thought a pope had been elected, but after some minutes the white smoke changed to black smoke, and still no pope came out. It was only 2 days later that Anti-Pope John XXIII was elected, and after his election, he held a mysterious 8-hour post-election meeting with all the participants in the conclave. Why did Anti-Pope John XXIII have to hold this post-election meeting? Did it concern the first set of white smoke and the election of the real pope, which he and the enemies of the Church blocked and prevented? It's obvious that the first set of white smoke indicated the election of the true pope, probably Tedeschini. Everyone, even the cardinals, believed that we had a new pope. But then the Freemasons and the communists got involved and prevented the new pope from assuming the office. This was the outside communication which Scortesco revealed. Then the white smoke changed to black smoke, and 2 days later the Freemasons and the communists implanted their man, the Freemasonic agent, anti-Pope John XXIII. The same interference occurred in the 1963 conclave, although in this case Cardinal Siri was the man who had his election illegally blocked in favor of the infiltrator Giovanni Montini, anti-Pope Paul VI. Some ask if Tedeschini and Siri were elected 1958 and 1963 respectively. Why didn't they stand up for their office more vigorously? Our purpose here is not to examine this question. Our purpose is simply to establish that the evidence of their elections, as well as the communication with the outside, demonstrates that something uncanonical went on during the conclaves of 1958 and 1963, as Scortesco revealed. This makes perfect sense because we know by divine faith that anti-Pope Paul VI could not have possibly possessed the keys of Peter, since he solemnly bound his subjects to the heresies of Vatican II. Vatican II could not have been bound in heaven, so we know that anti-Pope Paul VI had no power to bind on earth, for he did try to bind Vatican II on earth. And anti-Pope John XXIII also could not have been a true pope, since he set the table for the apostasy, while being a heretic himself. Even Malachi Martin, a best-selling author, a Vatican insider, and a hero of many defenders of anti-Pope John XXIII and Paul VI, blows this story wide open by admitting in his book The Keys of This Blood that it's well known that Cardinal Siri received the required number of votes to make him pope in 1963, but that Siri was influenced by what Martin calls, quote, a little brutality, end quote. Martin explicitly mentions that communication occurred between a member of the conclave and an internationally based organization concerning the Siri candidacy. So even Malachi Martin, a defender of anti-popes John XXIII and Paul VI, admitted that Cardinal Siri received pressure not to accept the office to which Martin admits he was elected. This confirms what Scortesco revealed and demonstrates again that the election of anti-Pope Paul VI was fraudulent. But besides the testimony of Martin and Scortesco, an interview that Cardinal Siri gave before his death is worthy of note. In a published interview with the Marquis de Franquerie, Louis Remy, and Francis Delay, Siri was asked questions on various topics, including what Scortesco revealed about his election. While denying various other things in the interview, Siri would not deny that he was elected pope. All he would say was that, quote, I am bound by the secret. This secret is horrible. I would have books to write about the different conclaves. Very serious things have taken place, but I can say nothing. The interviewers concluded that since Siri denied other things they asked him, but would not deny that he had been elected, that what Scortesco said was true. One should note that Siri was mistaken about being bound by the secret of the conclave, for the secret of the conclave would not bind when the salvation of millions of souls are at stake. And the horrible secrets of the conclave which Siri alluded to, without a doubt, referred to the unlawful intervention of outside forces, which blocked his ability to accept the chair of Peter. There is much more that could be said on this topic, but none of this evidence is necessary to prove that anti-Pope Paul VI was an anti-pope, who did not possess the keys and authority of Peter. We know this from the heresies of Vatican II and his confirmation of them. No one can deny this. The information concerning the 1958 and 1963 conclaves simply indicates how all of this has happened, and it demonstrates that none of the actions of the Vatican II antipopes have any bearing on papal infallibility. Thus, is there any surprise why Malachi Martin also reveals that at 12 a.m. on the day of anti-Pope Paul VI's coronation, a black mass was celebrated, and Satan was enthroned in the Vatican? Also, is there any doubt why anti-Pope Paul VI proceeded to give away the papal tiara, the sign of a true pope's authority, to a Jewish merchant? It is also documented that Anti-Pope John XXIII frequently remarked that Vatican II was a new Pentecost. Pentecost is recognized as the day on which the Roman Catholic Church was publicly founded. By identifying Vatican II as a new Pentecost, Anti-Pope John XXIII was announcing that it was the beginning of a new church. This new church is presently headed by Anti-Pope John Paul II, who declared at the very beginning of his reign that his primary intention was to implement Vatican II. Thus, is there any doubt that Vatican II and its anti-popes represented the beginning of the attempted eclipsing of the true Church of Christ by the apostate fake of Vatican II? Our Lady warned us at La Salette on September 19, 1846, by telling Melanie, quote, "Rome will lose the faith and become the seat of the Antichrist. The Church will be in eclipse," end quote. As Our Lady predicted and as Scripture predicted, the true Church of Christ has been eclipsed by the phony Vatican II Church. But as in an eclipse, the thing blocked out of sight still remains, so the true Church of Christ still remains in the remnant of faithful Catholics who maintain the traditions and the true faith. As St. Athanasius said, even if the true Church of Christ were reduced to a handful of true believers and one true priest, they would remain the true Church of Christ on earth. This remnant church is the visible Church of Christ, even though it is blocked out from the view of most by the Vatican II Church, which has stolen the Catholic Church's buildings, seminaries, and schools. The fact that Satan's fury and deception has been directed primarily against the Catholic Church proves that the Roman Catholic Church is the one true Church of Christ, which he wants to destroy. But the Catholic Church cannot be destroyed by the gates of hell. Anti-popes may reign and deceive a great many. This is a deception that God allows as a punishment for sin. But heretics cannot prevail against what Christ instituted upon Peter the rock. The official teachings of all the true popes have not contained, and will not contain error, and will remain until the end of time the only true transmission of the teaching of Christ, the deposit of faith. There will always be Catholics around who accept the infallible teachings of all the true popes, and only these people make up the Catholic Church, against which the gates of hell cannot prevail. The rest do not make up the Catholic Church, even though they claim to be Catholic, since they have denied the faith and have been automatically excommunicated for heresy. If you desire to save your soul, you must be a faithful Catholic and die in the state of grace. If you are in the new non-Catholic Church, you must come out of it to save your soul. One cannot be a faithful Catholic or die in the state of grace if one accepts the heresies of Vatican II or attends the new Mass. Furthermore, those who obstinately cling on to the belief that Anti-Pope Paul VI was a true pope and ignore the facts that we have presented will lose their souls in hell for all eternity. God desires the salvation of every person. He desires that all those who have been taken in by the devil's plan to deceive Catholics will come to the full knowledge of the truth. So if you know someone who has been deceived by the phony Vatican II Church, inform him of the truth by spreading this information. Hold on to the Catholic faith, whole and inviolate, outside of which no one can be saved. And fortify yourself with a strong prayer life and a true devotion to the Mother of God, who is the key in bringing us to her Son.